Hey guys, Chris here. So this is another one of those videos I did for Bushcraft Survival and Primitive Skills Mickey Wilson on Facebook. I hope you guys enjoy. Now on the first section of this video, it was a live video. I got a couple phone calls and it cut some things out of the video. So what got cut out of that video is covered in the second half of this video, and I strung them both together so you don't have to go to another video. But I hope you guys enjoy, and you should check out Mickey Wilson's Facebook group on Facebook. It's a pretty good group.
Sorry guys, I'm trying to find it on here so I can see your comments. Alright guys, so this is Chris with Bushcraft Survival and Primitive Skills Mickey Wilson. So today I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about traps, and mainly deadfalls. And I'm going to show you a couple deadfalls here in a little bit. And I took notes. I haven't done a live video in a while. There's a few things I wanted to say that I don't want to forget. And so bear with me. So most traps on the mainstream today are the same trap repeated over and over and over. And some of them are not the most simple traps. And many people become discouraged because they can't remember, do I need to do an L7 trigger, or what do I do on this? And so I'm going to show you a few things to undiscourage you. Traps are very simple for the most part. You know, no matter how complicated they seem at first, once you understand the concept, you can bridge that into all types of traps, and you just become better and better and better at doing it. I also wanted to say, so if any of you guys are having problems, you know, accomplishing something in the group, you know, may it be starting fire a certain way or traps or something like that, feel free to ask. You know, there's a lot of good knowledge in this group, and we can help you out. So back to traps. Now, traps date back tens of thousands of years. You know, as soon as mankind was trying to get animals and such, they started coming up with traps. Easier ways to get traps. The reason traps are so effective and work so good is traps hunt 24/7. As long as they're set and they're baited, they hunt when you can't. So if you're asleep, the trap's still hunting. If you're away from camp or wherever you may be, you know, if you're out fishing or something, those traps are still hunting for you. And a tip is, make sure, you know, set as many traps as you feel is too much, and you're about a third of the way done. And make sure you check your traps at least twice a day, because there are other animals out there that want what you caught just as bad as you do. So make sure you check those traps. Let's see. Okay, so I've been jumping around, but so on triggers, the more moving parts you have to a trigger system on a trap, the better that trigger system is. However, those complicated trigger systems take a lot of trial and error and a lot of trying to set that trap up to where it's going to stay there until an animal tries to take the bait. And I've got some tips for you guys. I might have already said a couple of them, but the biggest tip on whether you're setting a deadfall, a snare, you know, a spring pull snare, unless you're using a live branch that's still attached to a tree, try not to use green branches. The issue with green branches, so they're flexible. So if you set, a spring pole that's not off a live tree, so you're using a branch or something, and you use a green stick, that green branch is going to conform to the tension that you're putting on it, and it's not going to work as effective. Dry branches will. We make bows and things out of dry branches. Dry branches will retain their original form much better than a green branch, and you won't have it conforming to that curve or conforming and bending to the weight that you're putting on it. So you want to make sure you always try to use dry branches and sticks and such when you make your deadfalls. Now, as far as your deadfall itself here, it doesn't matter if it's green or dry, if it's a stone, a log, a brick, it just whatever you can find. And another tip is you want this weighted about, I'd say like 5, maybe 6 times the weight of the animal you're trying to catch. You don't want a gigantic log or stone if you're trying to catch a mouse. You'll just smash the crap out of it. Contrary to popular belief, you don't actually crush the living crap out of what you're trying to get. You drop the deadfall on it and you smother it to death. And this keeps from destroying internal organs and such as that, which is going to ruin the meat. Now, you can cook that out of it, but just a good rule of thumb is make sure whatever you're trying to catch, your weight or your deadfall is at least 5 to 6 times the weight of the animal. You don't want it too light because you may injure that animal and it will get away, and that's not good unless you can track it down and get it. Okay, so when you set a deadfall or some type of trap where you want that animal to go into a certain area, so if you got a deadfall set here, you don't really want the animal to come in from the sides, because that means it can escape from the sides. So you want that animal to have the longest path possible when this decides to drop. So a good thing to do is to take sticks or some type of brush or stones or logs or something and wall these sides in on your deadfall. And that will make that animal have to come in from this way to get to the bait, as well as exit that long way where it's got to follow this, because it's got a lot shorter route to come out on the sides than it does to go out this way. So you always want to make sure you use nature or your brain and brush in those sides to where it can't escape, or it has a longer way to travel before it can get out of the way of danger. Let's see. So if you've never been into traps before, I will suggest that you start simple. Start simple, learn the concepts, and build your way up to the more complicated traps. There are more traps than I guarantee anybody in the world knows by themselves. There's tons of traps. There's a lot of extremely primitive traps that are not very known today, but there's a lot of traps. So you can never know everything. No matter what it is, you can never know anything. Okay, let's see. So let's say you don't have a stone. You can use logs. Now there's one issue with a log. Logs are round. So your area, if that log's not heavy enough to catch, the fox or whatever you're trying to get, you can always weight the top down with other stones or logs or what have you. Now the advantage to splitting a log in half. So squirrels. A tip when you're setting deadfalls. So this deadfall here, and you're sitting here, whatever type of deadfall you're trying to do, and you're trying to balance and hold this weight up while you're doing your trigger. A tip is to get a stick with a Y or a couple sticks and use it to support the weight of that deadfall just a hair above where your trigger is going to set. And that way you can mess with your trigger, and once you get that set, you can take and pull this stick out. And that way, if you've got to adjust a stick or something, you don't have to move everything out of your way, set the weight down, because if you drop this on what you've got set up, there's a big chance you might break them. But that way you can, it's just a less step to getting your traps up, and it's a lot quicker that way too. All right, that's about all the short notes I took. But I want to say again, don't become discouraged when you're trying to learn these. You know, traps take a lot of trial and error. I never get them on the first try usually, and a lot of people aren't either. So just take the time and go through the trial and error, because you learn better through mistakes than you will if you set it right the first time and you say, oh, I set that the first time, I know how to do it now, I don't have to practice it anymore. Not true. As well as many of these traps, you know, especially the two I'm going to show you here in a little bit, they can be set in the house with no more than a few pencils and a notebook or a reading book or some type of book, school book. It doesn't matter what it is, you can still set it in your house, so you have no excuse on whether it's raining out or the wind's blowing terrible or whatever it is. You can do a lot of these traps in your house and get better at learning them, learning the concept and everything. All right, so I'm sure I forgot to cover some things, but we're going to go ahead and get into this. So, deadfalls. A lot of deadfalls I see, you have to take something, say a knife, carve triggers, cut sticks, all that type of stuff. Deadfalls can be simpler than that. And originally, when our native ancestors, you know, tens of thousands of years, started using these traps, they weren't using a knife to do these. What happens if you get stranded out there? You don't have a knife, you don't have a piece of flint, you don't have anything sharp. You can set a lot of these traps without the use of tools, and that includes snares as well. However, the same with when you're learning these things about starting simple and building, it's the same in the wild. So if you get stranded in the wild, you don't want to spend hours on end making cordage so that you can set a couple snares, when you can go out and set a lot of simple deadfalls, and then while those are hunting for you and you're back at camp, you can be making your cordage to set more complicated traps or snares or whatever it is, you know, carving your triggers up and everything. So knowing simple deadfalls is a big advantage to, you know, just knowing a few traps, as well as once you learn the simple deadfalls and, you know, simple snare traps and such, it's a lot easier to build off of those than it is to, you know, just start at the top of the line and never go back simple. Because if you start simple, you learn things that you can take and modify traps. And the next trap video I do, I'm going to show you, everybody knows or has heard of the Paiute deadfall. Now, there's a modification that you can do to the Paiute deadfall that takes a lot less effort, it's more efficient, and you can as well do it with the use of no tools except cordage. And I'll show that to you in my next video. But we're going to get to this. So, I'm going to show you two traps. The first one is known as the Samson Post deadfall. Now, I guarantee you the Samson Post deadfall is a lot older than Samson, because this trap's been around for thousands and thousands of years. It's one of the most simplest deadfalls you can set, but it's very efficient. And I'll show you, You know, a lot of times you won't have the access of another flat rock or something. You may only have this and Mother Earth. So what I like to do, and this is a good tip, no matter what type of trap it is, on your trigger stick that's going to be holding all the weight that you're putting down on it, don't set it on the ground, because it's going to dig in there. Now it's a lot more work to get that thing out. Take you a pebble, a stone, a broken stick, even a round stick, set it down there, set your trigger stick on top of it. Now this stick, your trigger stick, can't sink down into the ground, and your trap's set. Now this right here, this is basically a Samson post deadfall, besides one piece that I haven't added yet, and that's the bait. And this trap works excellent for mice, rabbits and such. So we've got our bait. And let's go to the flat stick. So you're going to put your flat stick down. I got a little dried piece of corn that I'm going to set there. Now I'm going to take my trigger stick, set it on top of my bait, and get this whole thing balanced here. Now dried corn's a little difficult. If any of you guys know anything about dried corn, it's very slick. So it may take me a couple tries to get this thing set. There you go. So what's going to happen is, it's set pretty good, but what's going to happen is this animal's going to come up, whether it be a rabbit or what, and start nibbling on this. Drop the deadfall. Now for a rabbit, you'd want something a lot bigger than this, but as an example to show you guys, it's a very simple trap. I didn't use a knife or anything. I broke a stick, found a piece of a broken stick, my piece of bait, and my stone. No carving, no cutting triggers to certain angles and all that stuff. Very simple, very effective. If you've got, you know, say you find your bait, you got 10, 20 pieces of bait, you can go around in not very much time and set 10, 20 Samson post deadfalls. Coming up, nibbling on the bait. Alright, so that's my I'd say most favorite simple deadfall that I know. And here's another one, and there's a lot of deadfalls in this category. Hey Brad, yeah, sometimes you do crush them, and when you do, you got to eat them anyways. You know, don't let anything go to waste. Hey Matt, how's it going? So, lever deadfalls. Now, there are many different traps in the lever deadfall category. A lot of you may not know that a Paiute deadfall is a type of lever deadfall. But I'm going to show you one a little bit simpler that you need no tools to make. So, and this goes, I'm not going to say this part yet, but instead of taking a straight stick, okay, as your support stick on your lever deadfall. So we've got a straight stick here, and on most lever deadfalls or Paiutes, you know, you'd carve your little notches and such for it. You don't have to if you can get it all balanced correctly. But instead of doing this, there's a simpler way, and it's more effective, because the issue with this is you're balancing on this, you're balancing on your trigger stick, and you're balancing on your support stick. That's 3 points of balance. That's not good, because any animal that's going to come for your trap is not just going to immediately, oh, I smell bait in there, let's go in the door. No, they're going to sniff around. They're going to nudge on things. They're going to move things. And a lot of traps fail because the animal is curious and it's trying to figure out how to get in there, because animals are not as dumb as people make them out to be. But there's a little bit more effective way of doing this where you can eliminate some points of balance. And that would be to find a stick with a little crook in it, or a stick where the branch is coming out on the side. Get you a Y stick. Now you have eliminated 1 point of balance. However, you still got this part down here which is balancing. So another trick is to take this and stick it in the ground to where this won't move. Your support stick does not have to balance. It is not your trigger. And the issue with letting it balance is if that animal is coming in and they brush this, they set off this trigger, because essentially it is a trigger as well. It's not as a hair trigger as your real trigger is, but it's still a trigger. So we needed to eliminate this as a trigger, and that's simply sticking it in the ground. It doesn't have to stick good, but just enough to where it's not going to wobble around and such too much. Let's pack it in. And another tip on lever deadfalls is don't set your sticks straight up this way, and there's a good reason for that. So if I set my stick up straight this way and my stone falls, it can hit my support stick. But if you set it at an angle like this and your deadfall falls, now it cannot brush your support stick, because your support stick could stop it from falling, it could slow it from falling. Anything that gives that game an extra second to get from the trigger stick out, you need to eliminate that. You'll be much more successful in your traps if you do. So we've got our support stick in the ground. Now we need our lever stick. Very similar to a Paiute deadfall. And you want to put it in the cross brace here, or the nook, or across the branch that you've got. But another tip is you want to make sure it's not too long. If it is and it falls, it can hit the ground and stop your deadfall from falling the rest of the way, or slow it down. So you want to make sure that you've got it pulled back far enough to where it will clear the ground. Okay? Make sure you hold it back here. We're on Mother Earth, so we're going to use a base stick. Now the cool thing about this lever trap is you could do it very similar, and I'm going to, because not all bait can be tied to a stick. So we're going to use a piece of corn like we did in the first trap. Set the corn down there, and let's see, that one's about right. Get your bait stick set on there. Set it on top of your corn, and you want it to where it's just barely supporting the weight, just barely on your lever stick. And now you've got a live trap. After that, or before, I would do it before personally. I would figure out where your trap's going to go, and then before you get it all set and done, definitely wall in one side and partially wall up the other side. That way you've only got a little gap here, but an easy access to get it set, and then finish your wall, and that eliminates the chances of you bumping this and knocking it down and having to reset it. So we've got a live trap, and we've got our, let's say, our rabbit coming along, sniffing around, can't get in there. He's going to come in here, he's brushing this, it's not falling, that's what you want. Comes in here, starts messing with that. Hopefully you caught you some food for the evening. I don't know the name to this trap. It's a very old trap. However, I do not know the name to it. If one of you guys do know the name to it, please comment. I would like to have a name to call it. I just call it my simple lever deadfall. So there you go, guys. Two very simple deadfalls, no tools needed to set, and you can set lots of these in a short amount of time. And then while these are hunting for you, you can be back at camp carving triggers for better traps or making cordage for snares and such. So it's really good to know these simple traps. And let's see. That's all I got, guys. So I hope you guys learned a little. I like to ramble. I'm sorry. Jump all over the place. I apologize. I also haven't done a live video in a while. But I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys maybe learned something, or picked up a couple tips here and there. Feel free to comment, if I said something that's not correct, or you've got another piece of information to add to what I said. Either I forgot to say it, or it's something I don't know. I love learning. If you've got some information I don't know, please comment. And I hope you guys enjoy the group. It's an excellent group. A lot of us go live. Mickey usually goes live on Wednesdays, I believe. Tom usually goes live on Thursdays. Madison is always live on Fridays. She has a ton of good information. I suggest you guys start watching her stuff. I always pick up a thing here or there from Madison, and she presents herself very well. She does an excellent job. And any of you other guys that feel you have some knowledge to share, feel you want to teach people in the group, or just show us something that's related that you do, feel free to do a live video. Just get a hold of one of the moderators or Mickey Wilson, send us a PM. You can even post a question on there, can I go live, such and such, and one of us will comment and have at it. So alright guys, this was Chris with Bushcraft Survival and Primitive Skills Mickey Wilson. Until the next one. Again guys, I apologize. I'm going to find it on here so I can see comments. Hopefully I've got my phone to where it won't go off and mess up this time. And again, I took notes. I apologize, bear with me. But there's some things I did forget to say in the last video, which, by the way, if you haven't watched the last video, I'd suggest you go watch that one, because I'm not going to repeat what I said in that video. So anyway, what got cut out of the last video? So I started to say logs. The issue with logs is logs are round, and your surface area that you have to actually catch your game is a lot smaller. So what you can do to a log is to split it down the middle, and this will allow you to have a wider surface area. Now there's one issue with that, is you just took that log and decreased its weight. So what you would probably need to do is take more logs or stones or something and weight down the top of that log you just split. And that way it still has enough weight for whatever game you're trying to catch. Now if you got a big enough log and you're trying to catch something small, you won't need to weight the top down. Say catching a mouse, you won't need a log this big around split. That'd crush the crap out of it. So, and another tip on round logs. So if you have to use round logs. One thing with round logs, depending on what type of trap you're using, they're round, so they like to roll. So one thing you can do with a round log to keep it from rolling on you is to put guideposts in. So find some sticks and stick them in the ground. Say this is a big log that you got for your deadfall. Find some sticks and stick them in the ground going down the sides, just so it will keep this from wanting to roll away from where your game is under the trigger. It will help guide it straight down to where you want your log deadfall to fall on. And that's more common when you're using logs for much bigger game, you know, say a fox or a coyote or something bigger. And an advantage to splitting logs, so this is another part that got cut out, is squirrels. Now with squirrels, you know, if you know anything about squirrels, squirrels like to live up in the trees. So if you split a log, now you have a deadfall that you can put up in a tree that is not likely to roll on you, because when you're up in a tree, you're going to be playing more of a balancing act than you would if you were on the ground. So by splitting a log, you know, you can use a Siberian deadfall, works very good on a split log up in a tree for squirrels, as well as a lot of the marten triggers. Those work pretty good on squirrels. A lot of the marten triggers are very long. You can get that bait as far back as you want. Now in my first video, you might have seen where I'd had it set up here. That was just so that you guys could see it better, but I think I have the camera good enough that I can set these farther back. And ideally on your triggers or your bait, you want those as far back as possible as you can get, depending on the game and what type of deadfall you're using. You know, say that Samson post deadfall that I showed you, which I'm going to show again just with a closer view. You can't go too far back. There's a point where you can't go as far back as you want, and that's one issue with a lot of simple deadfalls. That's why a lot of deadfalls where you carve your triggers up and carve your support sticks and things, put notches in them and such. That's why those work better, because those allow you to get your bait farther back. But these are more of a primitive trap that you don't need tools for. The issue with a lot of those is some of them your bait has to be a little farther forward, and that's where walling in your sides becomes an advantage to those simpler traps. It just makes them a little more effective. And another tip on when you're walling in your sides, depending on some of the traps, some of the lever traps or whatever you're doing, a lot of times it's a good idea to kind of fence in around where your action's at, just so that animal can't, when it's curious and getting around and nudging on things and trying to get into your bait, it just is more of a deterrent for it to try to get over here and set off your trap by chewing on something, or, you know, say you're doing a Paiute and you've got your rope, you know, keep it from chewing on that or brushing it or whatever by fencing this side in a little bit or brushing it in so that it can't get back there. But that doesn't always work. It just depends on the situation you're in. You know, sometimes you don't have the time to do a lot of that. And that's where these traps work very good if you can set them on a trail. You know, you, instead of walling in these sides, if you don't have the materials, you can set this on a trail or very close to a trail. Ideally, you'd want it on a trail where that animal is going to have to cross through it. And a lot of times, if you don't have bait, you can set a lot of these deadfalls on trails and they will still work for you until you can find bait to make them even more successful. But on a trail deadfall, I would always try to keep them out of
this area where your action's going on, as well as kind of, you'd want to on each end kind of make a funnel to where it funnels the animal through your trap. So, maybe if you can brush it in, or even dirt, if all you can do is get dirt, if you can pile up dirt here and just kind of create a funnel, and then do the same on the back side, that will make this trap more successful than if the animal comes up here. It's not going to want to go through this small narrow spot, it'd rather go around. Well, if you keep it from going around and force it in the middle, a lot of these trail set deadfalls and snares and things will work much better for you. Let's see. I've probably said a lot of this stuff. Okay, now I'm going to set the Samson post back up for you, and then I'm going to set, which I had no name for, I named it until I can figure out what the real name is, and that's the Samson post lever deadfall. Okay, so we've got our deadfall, and we've got the Y stick, same one I used in the last video, and let's see, let's get a support or a brace stick. And again, you want to make sure that this will clear the ground, but you can only go so far back before it will hit the ground. That's one issue with some of the simpler lever deadfalls. And again, you want to set this at an angle. If on these simple ones, definitely you want to set them at an angle. That way this will not brush or touch your support stick and slow this down or keep it from falling. Now we're on Mother Earth, and what I like to do on Mother Earth is use a base stick. And this is just a broken piece of a stick. It's kind of big, so you might want to dig it down. And another tip on the stick, whatever trap it is, on the sticks or triggers or whatever it is that's going to stay underneath this deadfall, you want to make sure it's not too big for the game you're trying to catch. So say we're trying to catch a mouse with this trap, we don't want to use a stick this big, because a mouse can squeeze itself down and fit through something this big. So you want to make sure you use small or skinny sticks when you're doing this. The smaller the better, but you can only go so small before things will break too easy. But you definitely want it small enough that this will trap the animal underneath and smother it. So let's take our base stick and line it up. Hopefully, I might have to adjust it. And another thing on this base stick and other parts of traps that you're messing with, the flat side is always easier, but there's one issue with using a flat side to support your trigger stick or something, is it's a little more difficult to go off. It's more of a hair trigger if you roll this thing over and use the round side of it. But the split stick, you don't have to dig it down as far, so that's why I tend to use split sticks. But a round one as well, even say you're sitting on top of another stone, if you use a round stick under your bait stick, it makes your trigger even more of a hair trigger, because now this can roll underneath it. So instead of your bait stick having to slide off of the side, now as soon as it starts to slide, your support stick underneath will roll, and that makes this trap the trigger even more of a hair trigger. But it also makes it a little harder to set as well. Not all bait can be tied or chewed to a stick, so we're going to use a piece of corn. And then I've got a tip for you as soon as I get this set about your bait. Let's see. And again, you want this barely on your brace stick here. And I like to hold these back here. Sometimes though, you can't do some of these one-handed under here. So you may need to take a stick, and I said this in my last video, but you may need to take a stick or two sticks and stick them in the ground and support your deadfall, just to allow you to mess with what's under here instead of having to adjust something and move everything out of your way. It's a lot quicker if you just take a stick or another stick like this with a Y in it. That way you can put it here and support that and mess with your trigger if you have to adjust it. So this is the Samson Post deadfall. Now the tip I have with your bait. So sometimes this won't work either, depending on how much bait you have. But you don't want to just put one piece of corn there on this trap and leave it like that. It will work, but it may take it, a lot longer, days even sometimes, to work to catch whatever you're trying to catch. So you want to lure that animal in here. So what we've done is we've walled in this side, walled up this side partially, did our trigger, finished walling it up to where it's got a door to get in. And let's say we walled around here. If I was going after a mouse on this, I wouldn't have to worry about walling this in. Again, it depends on your bait. A mouse is not very likely to brush any of this, so you wouldn't need to worry about walling that in. But you want to lure your animal in, and instead of using whole corn, or say it's a nut you've got, instead of lining whole nuts going out, take and break some of them. Break them into smaller pieces. You don't want to feel that animal up before it can get to your bait. You just want to entice it. Ooh, what's that? What's that? Entice it in to where your bait is, but your bait always needs to be bigger than your lure. And, say you're not using corn, say you're using something that you can tie or chew on a stick, even peanut butter or something, you would want to smear it around. Sorry about the dog. It's barking at the cat. But you'd want to smear it around on things just so that scent is drawing in. Take another stick, smear it on this, on a little piece of stick, and lay it out here. Smear a little bit more, lay it out there, smear some on the ground, smear a little up on the top or down at the bottom or the sides. Especially with stinky stuff, say fish guts or something, because it gets it up off the ground and it allows the wind to blow through it and draw that scent downwind. A lot of animals go after their food by smell, not so much sight. So bait your traps. Don't just bait them here, but bait and lure, I guess I should say. So I'd break these a lot smaller. And we've got our little muskrat, I guess. And he comes in the door here. He's messed and ate up the lure bringing in. He's still sniffing around. They're not just going to always go to it. Sometimes, they may even run back around or something. And then he starts chewing on this, eating it. Drops the deadfall, and hopefully you got yourself some food. Now let's move on to the Samson post lever deadfall. Okay, we've got our lever stick up here. Basically set it up the same way. I'm going to turn this around so I can use the smaller point though. Make sure it clears the ground. And you also want to make, before you start setting, let go of this, you want to make sure that you've got it pretty centered, because sometimes if you don't, it'll want to roll on you. And another tip I forgot to say about when you're walling your sides in, you know, sometimes what you're using here, it's a further path to go in this way than it is this way. You know, if you've got a big oval shaped rock or a big round rock, sometimes it's further for the animal to come in from this side or this side than it is for him to come in here. So when you do your walling or your funneling, you want to funnel that animal in through the area that it has the longest path to get to your bait before it can get the bait, set the trap off, and get out of danger. So you just need to, you know, look at what you're using and adjust to your situation and what materials you can find. Wait, this is the trap I just showed you. This is the Samson post lever deadfall. My apologies. The Samson post deadfall. Just like the lever, the Samson post lever deadfall, minus the lever. So put our piece of corn there. Put our trigger stick on top of our corn. And again, corn's pretty slick, so it's not always the easiest to set, I should say. And again, I'm just adjusting my deadfall to where it's going to balance correctly. And there you go, the Samson post deadfall. First one I showed you was the lever. And so we've got our little mouse or rabbit or whatever it is coming along, follows our trail in, sees the bait, starts messing with the bait, chewing on it, drops the deadfall. And you see how that, a lot of times with the Samson post deadfall, because you're balancing on your stick, it works the same as a logwood. So if you saw how this kind of rolled to the side, the tip on the Samson post is to put a couple guide sticks on the side, which forces this to fall straight down and not be able to roll to the side like it just did, because that may allow your game to escape on the side if you weren't able to wall this up. Now if you're able to wall this up, you've already got your guides. But if you can't, and you only have a couple more sticks, use a couple sticks to guide a Samson post to falling straight down. With lever deadfalls, you don't need to have guides usually, because your stick swings out of the way and your deadfall is allowed to fall straight down. But with the Samson post, it's got to slide off of your stick, or they've got to jerk this stick out of the way to get it to fall straight down, but it doesn't always do that. So I'm actually glad it did that, so I could tell you guys that tip. Okay, so that's the first two traps. Now, you know, essentially you want your bait as far back as you can get it, but depending on your animal or your materials, you can't always get it all the way back. So you may need to adjust your bait depending on your animal or what your bait is. I may have already said that. I apologize if I did. So now we're going to move on to the simple Paiute deadfall. Now the advantage to a Paiute deadfall is it allows you to get your bait further back in the trap. With some lever deadfalls, you can only go so far back before your lever stick hits the ground. On a Paiute, your lever stick is backwards. It's just in here a little ways. So it doesn't have very far to go before it's out of the way of this. So the advantage to that is you can have your bait further back in the trap. Now on a lot of Paiutes you see where people will support their bait stick on the top of their stone in a notch or a groove or something, or they'll run it all the way back to the corner and have their bait tied or chewed on right here. But sometimes you can't always do that. You know, what if you can't tie or chew your bait onto the stick? Well, there's a simple thing that you can do, and this is a good example of what I talked about in my last video about learning a lot of these simple traps, is you can take things from other traps and modify other traps. And that is to use a post stick. Now a post stick, or stake stick, I guess you could call it, is a stick that you stick down in the ground. So you want to figure out pretty well where this is going to go. And let's go in here and let's mark where I want to put my post stick. Now I'm going to take this stick, shove it down in the ground. You want it long enough to where it's not going to be able to push its way out. Ow. But you want it down far enough as well that it's not going to hold your deadfall up and allow that game to maybe escape out the back or escape out one of these sides or something. You don't want it too high to keep from killing your bait. You know, it may just trap it there, and then you go and, oh, my deadfall's down, I've got something. You go up and lift your deadfall up, and phew, out the door he goes. Okay. Now with a Paiute, as you know, or may not know, you need cordage. Now I'm not even going to use cordage on this. All I've got is yucca fibers, and I just took and rolled these together, kind of spliced them here in the middle. And what I did was I took my lever stick and I just used a clove hitch. You don't need much on these. So I used it, well, depending on how much weight you're holding, and how much weight you're holding will also dictate how thick or how strong your cordage is. But I just used a clove hitch on this with a couple knots to tie it off. And then I've got, I don't even know what you call this, your action stick maybe, I don't know. And I've got it tied with a clove hitch and a couple knots on the other end, a couple overhand knots. We won't need a base stick on this. We're using a post stick because one, this is smooth, and two, I'm using corn. I can't tie it or chew it onto my stick. I need it out a little bit further where my lever or my trigger stick is not, you know, running clear to the back or something where you could tie or chew your bait on here. I need my bait up here a little bit, so we're using the post stick. So we'll take our lever stick set it in the Y brace, and you don't have to go very far underneath, but you can see how much further that bait is back than it was on that other lever trap. That's a big advantage to a Paiute. Now, here's a good tip. A lot of people probably already know this, but instead of, having to retie this to the right length, this is obviously way too long. What I'm going to do is just wrap it around until I've got it the length I need. Still too long. That's probably about right. Another tip, you don't want this too big. So you don't want to stick, especially something this big, as your action stick, I don't know what it's called, that wraps around here. Or if it has to be this big, you want sticking out on this side, or wherever your baits or your animal is trying to come in, it's not sticking out too far, because they could set it off before they get in and be able to get out of the trap before the deadfall is allowed to fall on them. So you want to make sure you use a small piece, or you've just got it slightly in. And another tip on this here is try not to go around where you want the animal to go in at, because now this has to swing out and it could hit the animal and stop it or slow this enough that it can get out. So you want to make sure you go around the opposite side of where you want your animal to come in at. Okay, and then you want to hold this back here. And let's see, I don't have a stick measured for this yet. Well, here's another tip. You don't have sticks. Dead weeds, a lot of those are stiff enough that you can use those. And we'll go ahead and try it, as long as the puppy doesn't run off with it. A little bit too long. I might have just made it a little too short. But I think it'll still work. Now this one, where you're not tying or chewing the bait onto the stick, because you can use a post. You don't have to run it all the way back. You can use a post anytime you need. But when your bait is between your post stick and your trigger stick, you may need to adjust the height of things, because your post is down there quite a ways and sometimes you can't get to it. Especially with corn, because corn is slick. Corn is just a pain in the butt to set any kind of trap, but it works pretty good. Okay, and there you go. That is a very simple Paiute deadfall. And so we've got this side walled up, and we've got this side walled up. On a Paiute, I would suggest walling around here, just because you don't want the animal to come up and mess with your action stick or chew on your cordage. So I would wall this up, but you don't want your wall to where any of this can stop it from going off. And so we've got our rabbit, and he comes back in here, starts chewing on that. And a common thing with the Paiute, a lot of times, is this will always be sitting up here. But you know you did your Paiute right when you set it off and this flips over and lands out here somewhere. So that's a very simple Paiute deadfall. You don't need the use of any tools, any knives, and I didn't use cordage, I just used plant fibers, pretty strong plant fibers, but you could do the same thing with, you know, tree fibers or other plants. You don't always have to make the cordage. A lot of times taking, you know, 12 or 15 or 20 or so fibers of a plant and just twisting them together will create something strong enough to do what you need it to do. It just depends on what you need your cordage or whatever for. So let's go and see if I forgot anything. Oh, even on a trail snare, they're more effective if you bait them. If you don't have the bait, it doesn't, you don't, let's say this is I'm going to reset this, but without the bait. So let's say this is you got a Paiute here, and you've got a rabbit trail right here. So let's take our support stick or lever stick, I guess. This would be your support stick. About did that wrong. I already know it's too long, so and let's just put it on the post stick back here. And put it on our action stick. Oh. So we've got a trail going through our trigger stick. All the animal has to do is step or brush this stick and it will set this Paiute off. So you would want to create walls funneling your animal in this way as well as this way, depending, because animals just don't go one way down a trail. So you want to create a funnel on both sides, and you want to make sure they can't get to this side, and I would probably do this side too, just so they can't get up on top. And now you've got, let's say, our rabbit, little Bonnie, coming down the trail. So if you don't have bait, you can still use a lot of these on trails or outside of a den or something like that. So when you get into a little more complicated, you know, say the Paiute, where you've got to carve your notches and such, a lot of times on those you need to get your bait as far back as you can, but not too far the animal can't get to it. But a lot of times on those, sometimes it's an advantage to not put your support stick down in the ground and create this as a balance point as well. Especially on, not so much the Paiute, well, actually, yeah, on the Paiute as well, because sometimes it can roll to the sides. It's only happened to me a few times, but it has happened to where sometimes letting this balance here allows this to fall a lot easier than it does to stick it in the ground. It just depends on your situation. But I know there was a few times that some of these primitive traps worked better for me when I had this stick balancing where it wasn't stuck in the ground. It just allowed this to fall out of the way a little bit easier because this was able to fall down. So alright guys, that's all I had for you. I'm sure I forgot some things again, and I probably covered some things I didn't write down, but this was Chris, and I forgot to come in like this. I apologize, Mickey, but this was Chris with Bushcraft Survival and Primitive Skills, Mickey Wilson. And this was a reshow of the Samson Post deadfall, the Samson Post lever deadfall, and a very simple Paiute deadfall. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please comment. I didn't see Steve is in here. Thanks for watching, Steve. Toggle stick. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. That was one of those words I had right at the end of my mouth. Just couldn't think of it at the time. Toggle stick. So alright guys, thanks for watching. Chris here with Bushcraft Survival, Primitive Skills, Mickey Wilson. If any of you other guys want to go live, get a hold of Mickey Wilson, you know, even the moderators. Just shoot us a time or something just to make sure you're not overlapping with somebody else that does normally go live. I jump all over the place. I just make sure I don't go live when someone else is going live. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask. There's a lot of good knowledge in the group. We can help you out. Thanks for watching.